The chandeliers glittered like falling stars above the ballroom, but no one dared breathe too loudly. Every fork paused mid-air. Every whispered laugh faded into silence. She had arrived, the millionaire's wife, wrapped in a gown of midnight silk and diamonds that seemed stolen from the sky. Her presence swallowed the room whole. People said she was more feared than her husband, a man who built an empire with steel and money. She didn't need to raise her voice. A single glance from her could crush reputations, end careers, and send grown men trembling like children. The waiters shifted nervously, eyes darting, hands trembling as they carried crystal glasses across the marble floor. They had all heard the stories. One waitress once spilled a drop of the wine near her table. The next morning, she was gone. No one ever saw her again. Tonight, the tension was worse. It wasn't just any dinner. It was a gala filled with politicians, billionaires, and reporters desperate for a scandal. And at the center of it all sat the woman everyone whispered about, but no one dared confront. Her beauty was sharp, like glass. Her smile, rare, cold, and dangerous. Even her husband seemed to defer to her, as though the fortune in his hands still belonged to her judgment. She lifted her glass slowly, her diamond ring catching the light. The pianist faltered on a note, as if even the music bent to her will. Guests forced laughter at her jokes, even when they weren't funny. They leaned too close, trying to stay in her favor, terrified of being the target of her ridicule. But fate had other plans that night, for in this sea of silk, power, and fear, there was one quiet figure who had no idea her life was about to change forever. A young waitress carrying a tray toward the queen everyone dreaded. And with one sentence, she would shatter the illusion of untouchable power. Her name was Emily Carter. To the guests at the gala, she was invisible, just another server in a black and white uniform, moving quietly between tables. But behind that polite smile was a life carved by hardship. At 26, Emily carried the weight of struggles most of the wealthy in that room could never imagine. Her childhood was not gilded. She grew up in a small town where the rent was always late and the fridge was often empty. Her father had been a mechanic, strong but kind, until the accident that left him unable to work. Her mother, once a lively woman who sang while cooking dinner, fell into illness that stole both her energy and her joy. By the time Emily turned 18, she was both caregiver and breadwinner. College was a dream she couldn't afford, so she worked. First at diners, then coffee shops, and eventually at the elegant restaurant that catered to Manhattan's elite. It was supposed to be a step up. The tips could pay for her mother's medication. The paycheck could keep the lights on in their cramped apartment. Emily didn't mind the long hours or the aching feet. What she couldn't get used to was the humiliation, the way some customers snapped their fingers as if she were less than human, the way others looked straight through her, as though she was a chair or a shadow. Still, she endured, because every dollar mattered. Each night, when she got home past midnight, she would tiptoe into the tiny bedroom she shared with her mother. She'd kiss her on the forehead, whisper promises that tomorrow would be better, and fall asleep still wearing the faint scent of coffee and dish soap. She told herself that one day she would leave this life behind. One day, she would have enough saved to move her mother to a decent clinic, maybe even return to school. But hope had become a fragile thing. Lately, the bills piled higher than her courage. Her mother's treatments cost more than her paycheck. The landlord had started slipping notes under their door, and Emily often skipped meals, so her mother wouldn't. She was tired, not just in her body, but in her spirit. Yet she pushed forward, because what choice did she have? When she got the assignment to work at the gala, she tried to see it as a blessing. A single night's tips from the rich could cover a month's rent. She practiced her posture, smoothed her uniform, and promised herself she would not make a mistake. She had no idea she was walking into a storm, because while she was used to cruelty, She had never faced anyone like the millionaire's wife. And tonight, the woman who could silence a ballroom with one glance was about to set her sights on Emily. And once her gaze fell on the young waitress, nothing would ever be the same again. The gala was held in the ballroom of the Imperial Crown, one of Manhattan's oldest and most exclusive hotels. The kind of place where every chandelier was hand-cut crystal, every curtain woven from velvet, thick enough to muffle whispers, and every chair cost more than a month's salary for the staff. The scent of roses filled the air, imported from France and arranged into towering centerpieces that climbed toward the ceiling like blooming trees. A live orchestra played softly in the corner, their music a careful balance of elegance and restraint. Outside the hotel, the city roared with the usual chaos of taxis and sirens. But inside, it was another world entirely. Men in tailored tuxedos clinked glasses of vintage champagne, while women in glittering gowns leaned close to gossip about stock deals and scandals. Photographers hovered near the entrance, snapping flashes at every powerful figure who stepped across the red carpet. Tonight wasn't just a dinner, it was theater, and every guest was both actor and audience. For Emily, stepping into this world as a waitress felt like stepping onto another planet. Her black and white uniform marked her as part of the invisible class, the people who moved silently behind the curtain, so the rich could shine. But she couldn't help noticing every detail. The chandeliers shaped like constellations, the marble floor polished until it gleamed like ice, the sound of laughter that felt rehearsed more than genuine. She moved through the crowd carefully, balancing trays of champagne flutes, avoiding the elbows of guests who didn't even glance at her. At one table, she overheard two businessmen whispering about a merger worth billions. At another, a senator's wife boasted about her summer home in the Hamptons, her voice dripping with practiced boredom. It was dazzling, yes, but also suffocating. Every smile looked forced. Every laugh felt hollow. The whole room seemed like a grand performance, and Emily realized she was one of the stagehands, ensuring the illusion held together. Still, she couldn't deny the strange thrill of it. This was the world she had only seen in magazines, the world of power, wealth, and untouchable elegance. And yet, beneath the glitter, she felt something darker humming in the air, an edge of fear. The way conversations faltered when the millionaire's wife passed by. The way even the most confident guests straightened their posture and adjusted their tone when she glanced in their direction. Emily had never seen anything like it. This wasn't admiration. It was control. The millionaire's wife didn't just enter a room. She owned it. And as Emily set down a tray of glasses near her table, she felt the weight of that icy presence for the first time. The woman's eyes, sharp as knives, flicked toward her. A chill ran down Emily's spine. In that moment, Emily realized she was no longer just a servant in the background. She had been noticed. The millionaire's wife was named Veronica Hale. People spoke her name with the same careful tone one might use for a storm, beautiful from a distance but dangerous up close. Born into wealth, married into even greater power, she had become a figure that no one dared cross. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence was often louder, her eyes sharper than any insult. As Emily moved from table to table, she could feel the ripple Veronica created wherever she went. Guests who were laughing moments before would suddenly fall quiet, waiting for her approval. Even her husband, a man who controlled companies across 3 continents, deferred to her. Rumor had it, she could make or break business deals with a single word at a dinner party. That night, Veronica was in rare form. She sat at the center table, her black gown catching the light like liquid night, her diamond earrings flashing with every tilt of her head. Around her were some of the city's most powerful families, yet they all leaned toward her like flowers bending toward the sun. Emily tried to stay invisible, but fate has a cruel way of pushing the powerless into the path of the powerful. While delivering a tray of champagne, she passed close to Veronica's table. One of the glasses wobbled slightly on the tray, just enough to draw Veronica's attention. Veronica's eyes locked onto her, cold and unblinking. "Careful," she said, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the orchestra's music. "If you can't manage a simple tray, perhaps you should find another profession." A few guests chuckled nervously. Emily bowed her head quickly, murmuring an apology. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor. But the damage was done. Veronica had seen her. And worse, she had decided Emily was tonight's target. The insults came subtly at first. When Emily set down a glass, Veronica inspected it as though checking for fingerprints. When Emily placed a plate, Veronica wrinkled her nose, as if the scent of the food had somehow been tainted by the waitress's hands. Each gesture, each glance, was designed not just to belittle Emily, but to remind everyone watching of Veronica's power. And people were watching. That was the cruelest part. Other servers looked on with pity but dared not intervene. Guests hid their smirks behind napkins, grateful they weren't the ones in the spotlight. Emily's cheeks burned, but she kept moving, swallowing her pride because she needed this job more than she needed her dignity. Then Veronica leaned back in her chair, her voice carrying farther this time. "Do they hire anyone these days? Really, who thought she belonged here?" The laughter that followed was sharper now, less nervous, more entertained. Emily's hands trembled as she set down another glass. She wanted to cry, but she bit her lip until she tasted blood. She reminded herself of her mother, waiting at home for the medication Emily's wages would buy. She reminded herself of the rent due at the end of the week. She reminded herself she couldn't afford to lose this job. But Veronica wasn't finished. She never stopped until she got what she wanted. Complete humiliation. And as she raised her glass again, her eyes glittered with the promise of something worse. Veronica was about to turn her cruelty from subtle jabs into a public spectacle. The room had become a stage, and Emily stood at the center without meaning to. Veronica Hale, draped in diamonds, had been circling her like a predator toying with prey. Every insult, every smirk, every cold word was meant to break her. The guests leaned in closer, not to help, but to witness the spectacle. Emily's hands trembled as she adjusted the tray on her arm. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the sting of tears threatening to fall. Her entire body screamed at her to stay quiet, to endure, to let it pass. That was how survival worked for people like her. But something inside her shifted. She remembered her mother's voice, weak but steady, on nights when the pain from her illness kept her awake. "Emily," she would whisper, "don't ever let anyone take away your dignity. We may not have much, but we still have our pride." Those words struck like a bell in Emily's chest, cutting through the noise of the gala. The laughter from Veronica's table grew louder. Veronica leaned back in her chair, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Honestly," she announced for all to hear, "some people should know their place. Serving drinks is all they'll ever be good for." Something snapped. Emily stopped trembling. She placed the tray down on the nearest table with deliberate calm. Then she straightened her posture, shoulders back, chin lifted. For the first time that evening, she didn't look at the floor. She looked directly at Veronica. The sudden silence was startling. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the orchestra faltered. All eyes locked onto the young waitress who dared to meet Veronica's gaze. And then Emily spoke. Just one line. Her voice was steady, low but clear, carrying across the ballroom like the strike of a match in the dark. "Respect," she said, "isn't bought with diamonds. It's earned by how you treat people." The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A senator's wife covered her mouth. A young executive nearly dropped his glass. Even the pianist missed a note, the discord echoing like punctuation. Veronica's smile froze. Her perfectly painted lips tightened, her diamond earrings catching the light as she turned sharply toward Emily. For the first time all evening, the confidence in her eyes wavered. Emily didn't say another word. She didn't need to. Her line had landed like a strike against glass, a crack spreading across Veronica's carefully polished image. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. It wasn't just Emily standing taller now. It was every server in the room who had ever been belittled, every guest who had bitten their tongue in fear. Something had shifted. The balance of power was no longer absolute. And as the room held its breath, waiting for Veronica's reaction, one truth became undeniable. The woman everyone feared had finally been challenged, and she was about to lose control. For a moment, Veronica Hale sat frozen, her smile turned to stone. The room held its breath, waiting for her fury. Everyone expected her to strike back with the venom she was famous for. But she didn't. She couldn't. Emily's single sentence had sliced through her armor, exposing the truth she had spent years hiding. Her power depended on fear, not respect. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Then a laugh broke it, not from Veronica, but from one of the guests at a nearby table. A businessman, red-faced from too much champagne, chuckled and shook his head. "She's right," he said. "Respect isn't bought." Others joined, first with hesitant murmurs, then with nods, then with bold agreement. The room that once trembled under Veronica's shadow now began to shift. Guests exchanged glances, whispers turning into open conversation. For years, many had tolerated her cruelty in silence. Tonight, a single waitress had given them permission to see her clearly. Veronica's cheeks flushed crimson. She rose from her chair, diamonds glittering under the chandeliers, her voice trembling with outrage. "You will regret this," she hissed at Emily. But Emily didn't flinch. She stood tall, her eyes steady. "I already regret nothing," she said softly. It was then that the most unexpected ally stepped forward. An older man with silver hair, seated across the room, stood and tapped his glass for silence. He was Robert Ashford, a respected philanthropist and media mogul. His voice carried the weight of authority. "I have dined at this table many times. I have watched how you treat people, Veronica. Tonight, you've been exposed, and by the bravest person in this room, a young woman who asked for nothing but respect." Gasps filled the hall. Cameras flashed as reporters scribbled notes. Veronica's mask cracked completely. She sputtered, searching for words, but none came. The power she had wielded for so long slipped from her grasp like water through fingers. Her husband, pale and embarrassed, placed a hand on her arm. "Enough," he muttered, guiding her toward the exit. For the first time, she obeyed quietly, her head bowed under the crushing weight of humiliation. The queen of the gala had been dethroned, not by a rival millionaire, but by a waitress with courage. The orchestra resumed softly, trying to patch the fractured atmosphere, but the mood had shifted permanently. Guests no longer looked at Emily as invisible. They looked at her with admiration. Some even clapped quietly as she collected her tray, though she no longer trembled. Later that night, as the gala ended, Robert Ashford approached Emily. "You reminded us of something we all forget," he said gently. "Dignity is priceless. If you ever need help, you'll find my door open." Emily thanked him with tears in her eyes, but she knew the real victory wasn't in offers of help. It was in the fact that she had stood her ground. She returned home to her mother and whispered the story, holding her hand. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. And as Emily lay awake that night, she realized something profound. She hadn't just defended herself. She had changed the story. The woman everyone feared was now the woman everyone pitied. And the girl no one noticed had become the one voice the entire room would never forget. Because sometimes the most powerful thing in the world isn't money or diamonds. It's one sentence spoken with courage. The ballroom slowly returned to motion, but nothing felt the same. Where once Veronica Hale had dominated every glance and every whisper, now the guests avoided her name entirely, as if saying it aloud might remind them of their own silence in the face of her cruelty. The only name that lingered in their minds was Emily Carter. the waitress who had spoken one simple line that shifted the balance of the room. Emily, however, did not feel victorious. Not yet. As she cleared the tables, she could feel her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. The faces watching her were no longer filled with disdain, but curiosity, admiration even. Some nodded in quiet respect when their eyes met hers, yet she knew admiration could vanish as quickly as it appeared. People in that room thrived on drama. Tomorrow they might forget her courage and only remember the scandal. Still, something inside her felt lighter. She had not planned to fight back, yet she had, and the world hadn't ended. She thought of her mother, who would smile weakly when Emily shared the story, proud that her daughter had defended their dignity. That thought carried her through the rest of the night. When the gala ended, Emily left by the service door, as she always did. Outside, the night air was crisp and cool, the city buzzing with its endless noise. She walked to the subway, her uniform rumpled, her shoes pinching her feet. But for once, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. The next morning, however, reality reminded her of its sharp edges. The landlord's notice was still wedged under the apartment door. Her mother's medicine bottles still sat half empty on the kitchen counter. Life had not magically transformed because of one bold sentence. Emily sighed, placing the tip money from the gala into a jar marked rent. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But she carried on. That afternoon, she returned to work, expecting whispers from her co-workers. Instead, she was met with hushed excitement. "Did you hear?" one of the other waitresses whispered. "They're talking about you in the papers." Emily froze. "What?" The woman pulled out her phone, showing a headline from a gossip column. "Millionaire's wife humiliated at gala by courageous waitress." The article described the moment in detail, painting Emily not as a servant, but as a heroine who had reminded the city's elite of their own humanity. Emily's stomach twisted. She had never wanted fame. All she had wanted was to keep her job, pay her bills, and protect her mother. Now she was at the center of a story, spreading faster than wildfire. And with every story, there comes a response. Veronica Hale was not the kind of woman to suffer humiliation quietly. That very evening, as Emily clocked out, she found a sleek black car parked near the restaurant. A man in a dark suit stepped out, his expression unreadable. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his voice low. "Mrs. Hale would like to have a word with you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The battle at the gala had ended, but a new war was beginning. And this time, it wouldn't be played out in whispers. It would be personal. The black car's leather seats smelled faintly of expensive perfume as Emily slid into the back, her hands trembling. The driver said nothing, and the suited man sat silently across from her, staring out the window. The city's neon lights streaked past, blurring into lines of gold and red. Emily wanted to ask where they were going, but she already knew. Veronica Hale didn't summon people. She commanded them. And now, after being humiliated in front of the city's elite, Veronica wanted to reclaim her power. The car stopped in front of a towering glass building that seemed to scrape the clouds. The doorman bowed as they entered, and Emily was ushered into a private elevator. Her heart pounded with each floor, the numbers ticked upward. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse that looked more like a palace than an apartment. White marble floors, crystal vases, walls lined with art that could feed a small country if sold. Veronica sat by the window, her silhouette framed by the city lights. She didn't rise to greet Emily. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the room. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble," Veronica said finally, her voice calm but edged with steel. Emily swallowed hard. "I only spoke the truth." Veronica turned, her eyes sharp, her lips painted the same perfect red as the night before. "Truth? Do you think anyone in that room cared about your truth? They laughed because they wanted to see me bleed. And you were their weapon." Emily stood straighter. "I didn't want to humiliate you. I just wanted you to stop humiliating me." For a moment, silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Then Veronica laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Do you know what happens to people who embarrass me? They disappear. They lose their jobs, their reputations, everything. And you, little waitress, you're nothing more than a name in a gossip column." Emily's chest tightened, fear crawling up her spine. But she forced herself to hold Veronica's gaze. Maybe. But sometimes one sentence is enough to reveal who someone really is. Veronica's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she masked it again. She rose, gliding across the marble floor like a queen approaching a subject. "You think this is over? It's only begun. I will make sure you regret the night you ever looked me in the eye." Emily felt her knees weaken, but she refused to step back. "You can take my job. You can drag my name through the dirt. But you can't take back what everyone saw. You can't erase the truth." For the first time, Veronica's mask cracked. A flash of anger burned in her eyes, raw and uncontrolled. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Then perhaps it's time they saw a different truth, one that destroys you completely." Emily's blood ran cold, ran. She didn't know what Veronica meant, but she knew it was dangerous. And as she left the penthouse that night, she realized this wasn't just a battle for her dignity anymore. It was a fight for her very survival. The morning after the confrontation, Emily woke to the sound of her mother coughing in the next room. Sunlight spilled weakly through the thin curtains of their small apartment, but the warmth felt far away. Emily brewed a pot of coffee, her mind still replaying Veronica's threat from the night before. She wanted to believe it had been nothing but intimidation, empty words from a humiliated woman. But when Emily checked her phone, her heart sank. Dozens of missed calls, unread messages, and then the headline that made her stomach twist. "Waitress sparks scandal. Did she plan to humiliate Veronica Hale?" The article wasn't the same sympathetic story she'd seen earlier. This one was vicious, painting her as an ambitious nobody who staged the moment to get attention. It claimed she had rehearsed her one-liner, that she was chasing fame, that she was unprofessional and disruptive. Emily dropped the phone onto the counter, her hands trembling. She knew immediately who was behind it. Veronica. The woman didn't need to raise her voice. She had media contacts, influence, and enough power to bend the truth into any shape she wanted. At the restaurant, the atmosphere was worse. Her manager called her into the office, his expression grim. "Emily, people are talking. Some of our regular clients are threatening to pull their reservations if you're on the floor. They say you embarrassed Mrs. Hale, and now it's hurting business." Emily's throat tightened. "So what are you saying? That I should apologize?" The manager looked away. "I'm saying maybe you should take some time off, indefinitely." It felt like a punch to the chest. This job wasn't just a paycheck. It was survival. Without it, how could she afford her mother's medication? How could she pay rent? She stumbled home, numb, her apron clutched in her hands like a piece of her life that had just been torn away. Her mother tried to comfort her, but Emily could see the worry in her eyes. The medicine bottles on the counter were running out, and now so were their options. That evening, another headline appeared online. "Anonymous source claims waitress has a dark past." Rumors swirled that she had been fired from other jobs, that she was unstable, that she was using her mother's illness for sympathy. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter in Veronica's world. Power did. Emily sat in the dark, scrolling through the lies, her chest aching. This wasn't just an attack on her career, it was an attack on her life, her family, her dignity. She realized Veronica wasn't trying to silence her. She was trying to erase her. But beneath the fear, something else began to grow. Anger. She thought back to the gala, to the moment when her voice had cut through the silence. She had already proven she could stand up once. Maybe she could do it again. As the night stretched on, Emily made herself a promise. She wouldn't let Veronica destroy her. She would fight back, even if it cost her everything. And then her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Miss Carter," a man's voice said. "I think we need to talk. I know things about Veronica Hale, things that could help you." Emily froze, the phone trembling in her hand. For the first time, she realized she might not be alone in this fight. The voice on the phone was calm, deliberate, and carried the weight of someone who had been waiting a long time to speak. "My name isn't important," the man said, "but what you need to know is this. I used to work for Veronica Hale, and I know things that could change everything." Emily's grip tightened on the phone. "Why are you calling me?" "Why now?" "Because she's gone too far," the man replied. "You're not the first person she's tried to destroy, but you can be the last." A chill ran through Emily's body. Her instinct told her not to trust strangers, especially when Veronica's shadow loomed over every corner of her life. Yet something in his tone felt different, not threatening, but tired, like someone who had carried a heavy secret for years. They agreed to meet the next day at a quiet cafe far from the glittering towers of Manhattan. Emily arrived early, her nerves frayed, her eyes scanning every face. When the man finally entered, she recognized him immediately from photographs she had once seen in society magazines. He was Aaron Price, Veronica's former financial advisor. He looked older now, his once polished appearance worn down, his eyes shadowed by regret. He sat across from her, lowering his voice. "You stood up to her in a way none of us ever could," he said. "But you need to understand who you're dealing with. Veronica doesn't just use fear. She uses secrets." Emily frowned. "What kind of secrets?" Aaron leaned in closer. "She wasn't born into money the way people think. She came from nothing. Worse than nothing. Her family was drowning in debt, and she built her life on lies to cover it up. But that's not all. Years ago, she buried evidence of financial crimes, money laundering, fraud, manipulation. If the truth came out, her empire would collapse overnight." Emily's pulse quickened. This was more than gossip. It was dynamite. But with it came danger. "If you know all this, why haven't you said anything?" Aaron's eyes darkened. "Because anyone who crosses her pays the price. She ruined my career when I tried to leave. But seeing what she's doing to you, I can't stay silent anymore. You deserve to know the truth." Emily sat back, stunned. For so long, Veronica had seemed untouchable, her power absolute. But now, cracks were appearing in the marble facade. Secrets could undo her in ways insults never could. Still, Emily hesitated. Using these secrets would mean stepping into a world of lawyers, headlines, and dangerous games. She wasn't sure she had the strength or the allies to fight at that level. Aaron seemed to sense her doubt. He slid a folder across the table. "This is proof. Bank records, contracts, letters. I kept them in case I ever needed protection. Now they're yours. Do what you think is right." Emily's hands shook as she opened the folder, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was holding the key to Veronica Hale's downfall. But power came with a price, and Emily knew Veronica would not sit quietly while her secrets slipped into someone else's hands. As Aaron left the cafe, his warning echoed in her mind. "Be careful. Once you start down this path, there's no turning back." Emily tucked the folder into her bag, her heart racing. She had been pushed into this war. But now, she had a weapon. And with that weapon came a choice that could change everything. That night, Emily sat alone at the small kitchen table in her apartment. The folder Aaron had given her lay unopened in front of her, its edges worn, its weight oppressive. Her mother was already asleep in the next room, the sound of her faint breathing mixing with the hum of the old refrigerator. Emily's hands hovered above the folder, like it was something alive, something dangerous. If she opened it, there would be no going back. Inside were the secrets of Veronica Hale, the lies, the crimes, the hidden history that could bring her empire crumbling down. It was the kind of evidence people would kiss all to keep buried. And now it was in the hands of a waitress who had never wanted more than to pay rent and keep her mother alive. She imagined what exposing Veronica could do. The woman who had humiliated her, who had stolen her job and her dignity, would finally face justice. The world would see the truth. Veronica wasn't a queen. She was a fraud. Emily could free herself from the shadow of fear that had loomed over her since that night at the gala. But another voice whispered louder. The risks. Veronica was ruthless. If she discovered Emily had these documents, she wouldn't just retaliate, she would destroy her completely. And it wasn't just Emily's life on the line. Her mother, frail and dependent, would suffer too. The thought of Veronica's vengeance reaching their small apartment made Emily's chest ache with dread. She closed her eyes, remembering her mother's words. Dignity isn't about winning, Emily. It's about standing tall even when the world pushes you down. Was using Veronica's secrets dignified, or was it stooping to her level? The hours ticked by. Midnight turned into dawn, but still Emily sat frozen, torn between fear and defiance. Every choice seemed heavy, impossible. To stay silent meant surrendering to Veronica's lies and losing everything she had fought for. To fight back meant stepping into a storm she might not survive. Finally, as the first rays of sunlight spilled across the table, Emily opened the folder. Her breath caught as she flipped through the pages. Bank statements, offshore accounts, forged contracts, all neatly organized, undeniable proof of Veronica's corruption. Each page was another crack in the fortress Veronica had built around herself. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, not from fear but from clarity. For the first time, she saw the truth plainly. Veronica's power was built on lies, and lies could be broken. She closed the folder with trembling hands and whispered into the stillness, "I can't stay quiet anymore." But before she could take her next step, a knock echoed at the door. Sharp, urgent. Emily's body stiffened. No one knocked at their apartment this early, not without reason. She looked at the folder, then at the door, her heart pounding in her throat. Another knock, louder this time. Emily rose slowly, her bare feet silent against the floor. She reached for the doorknob, her breath shallow, every instinct screaming danger. And when she opened the door, the last person she expected was standing there. When Emily pulled open the door, her breath caught. Standing in the hallway wasn't Aaron, nor a stranger in a suit, nor one of Veronica's men. It was Robert Ashford, the silver-haired philanthropist who had defended her at the gala. He looked different outside the glitter of chandeliers, dressed in a simple grey coat. His face carried the fatigue of a man who had lived too many battles, yet his eyes were sharp, kind, and unwavering as they met hers. "Miss Carter," he said softly, almost in a whisper. "May I come in?" Emily hesitated, clutching the edge of the door. Why was he here? Did he know about the folder? Was this another trap, another move in Veronica's game? But something about his presence, the steady calm, the absence of judgment, made her step aside. Inside, Robert glanced around the modest apartment. His gaze lingered on the cracked walls, the worn couch, the stack of unopened bills on the table. He said nothing at first, only lowering himself into a chair with the dignity of a man used to far grander surroundings. "I imagine you're wondering why I'm here," he began. Emily nodded cautiously. "I saw the stories this morning," Robert continued. "The lies Veronica planted, the way the media has twisted what happened. You don't deserve this, and I couldn't sit by and watch her destroy another life." Emily swallowed hard. "You came all this way, just to tell me that?" Robert leaned forward, his voice lowering. "No. I came because I believe you may be the only person who can end her reign of fear, and I want to help." Emily's chest tightened. First Aaron, now Robert. Two powerful figures willing to stand against Veronica. It felt surreal. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Because you already did what none of us dared," Robert said. "You looked her in the eye and stripped away the illusion. That took courage, and the world saw it. that makes you dangerous to her, but also powerful. Emily thought of the folder sitting on the kitchen table, its secrets heavy as a ticking bomb. She wondered if Robert somehow knew about it. His eyes flicked toward the table, then back to her face, as if reading her thoughts. "I have information too," he said. "Veronica has left a trail of enemies, some of them in very high places. If you're willing to fight, I can connect you to people who will stand with you, but you need to decide soon. She won't stop. Every day you hesitate, she grows bolder." Emily's pulse raced. The choice pressed down on her from every angle. Aaron's folder, Robert's offer, the threat pounding at her door in headlines and whispers. She wanted to run, to hide, to protect her mother and forget this nightmare. But deep down, she knew Robert was right. Silence only gave Veronica more power. Robert rose to leave, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Miss Carter. It's doing what's right despite it." Emily stood frozen in the doorway as he disappeared down the hall. The apartment felt smaller now, the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. She turned back toward the table, the folder waiting for her, Robert's words echoing in her ears. And as she reached for it, a shadow moved outside her window, proof that someone else was already watching. At first, Emily thought her mind was playing tricks on her. A shadow, quick and fleeting, cast across the window of her small apartment. But when she moved closer, pulling the curtain just slightly aside, she saw it. A dark figure leaning against a car across the street, a cigarette glowing faintly in the night. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't the casual loitering of a stranger. The man's posture was deliberate, watchful, like a predator biding its time. Emily stepped back from the window, her breath coming fast. Had Veronica already sent someone? Was this the punishment she'd promised during their confrontation in the penthouse? She hurried to her mother's room, peeking inside. Her mother was still asleep, unaware of the danger outside their door. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, willing her heart to slow down. She couldn't let fear paralyze her. But as the hours ticked by, the figure didn't move. He stayed in place, the glowing ember of his cigarette sparking every few minutes, like a silent reminder that she was not alone. Not even here, in her own home. By morning, the car was gone, but the unease remained. On her way to the corner store, Emily caught sight of another man at the end of the block, reading a newspaper, but glancing up too often. Later, when she went to pick up her mother's prescription, she noticed a woman in a black coat entering the pharmacy right after her. Everywhere she went, eyes followed. That night, she confided in her mother. "Mom, I think someone's watching us," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her mother reached for her hand, her frail fingers squeezing gently. "Emily, you have to be careful. If Veronica feels threatened, she'll do anything. Promise me, you won't let her destroy you." Tears stung Emily's eyes. "I promise, but I don't know how to fight someone like her." Her mother gave a weak smile. "You've already done it once. You told the truth. Sometimes the truth is the strongest weapon." Those words comforted her, but only for a moment. Because when Emily returned to the living room, she found an envelope slipped under their door. No return address, just her name, written in bold, sharp handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph, her and her mother walking down the street earlier that day. On the back, a message scrawled in black ink. "Stay silent, or you won't be able to protect her." Emily's knees nearly buckled. The threat wasn't subtle anymore. It was personal. Veronica's shadow had followed her home, and now it was watching every step. She clutched the photo to her chest, torn between fury and terror. She had never felt more cornered, more vulnerable. But somewhere inside her, that same spark that had carried her through the gala began to flicker again. If Veronica wanted her silenced, it meant she was afraid. And that gave Emily something she hadn't felt in days: hope. Still, she couldn't ignore the danger. She needed help, And soon. And as the phone rang suddenly on the table, shattering the silence, Emily's pulse raced. She picked it up cautiously. A familiar voice whispered on the other end, "It's time. We have to move before she does." Emily froze, because this time the voice wasn't Aaron's or Robert's. It was someone she thought she could never trust. Emily nearly dropped the phone when she heard the voice. Smooth, deliberate, but unmistakable. "Mrs. Hale's husband," the voice said. "Richard Hale. Don't hang up." Her grip on the receiver tightened. Of all the people she expected to reach out, Veronica's husband was the last. He had always seemed silent at her side, the man in the shadows behind the Queen. Was this another trap? "What do you want?" Emily asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. A pause, then a weary sigh. "To warn you, and to help you. Veronica has gone too far." Emily's chest tightened. "Why should I believe you? You stood beside her while she humiliated me. You watched and did nothing." "I know," Richard admitted, his tone heavy with regret. "For years I've done nothing. I thought it was easier to let her play her games, to let her control everything. But last night, when I saw what she did to you, what she's trying to do now, I realized she won't stop until she destroys you, and she will destroy me too. Don't think I'm safe. I'm her prisoner, just like you." Emily's mind spun. Was this true? Could the man everyone assumed was powerful actually be another victim of Veronica's cruelty? "I don't need pity," she said firmly. "I need proof. If you want me to believe you, give me something real." Richard's voice lowered. "Veronica isn't as invincible as she wants people to think. I've kept records, copies of the very files she's desperate to hide. Offshore accounts, forged signatures, even names of the politicians she's paid to keep silent. I couldn't act before, but maybe together we can." Emily felt the weight of the folder Aaron had given her, still sitting on the table. Now, if Richard was telling the truth, she had another piece of the puzzle. Veronica's empire wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. Still, doubt gnawed at her. "Why me? You could go to the police. You could end this yourself." "Because," Richard said quietly, "the world already believes in you. They saw you stand up to her when no one else dared. If the truth comes from you, it will be undeniable. From me, it will look like revenge. From you, it will look like justice." Emily's breath caught. Justice. The word felt both terrifying and exhilarating, but before she could answer, Richard's voice grew urgent. "We don't have much time. Veronica is planning something bigger. She's not satisfied with destroying your reputation. She wants to ruin you permanently. Meet me tomorrow. I'll give you what I have." The line went dead before she could reply. Emily stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Was this salvation or another setup? She didn't know. But one thing was clear. Veronica's husband had just stepped out of the shadows, and if he was telling the truth, he was handing her the very weapon Veronica feared most. Emily sank into the chair, the phone slipping from her hand. Her mother's soft breathing in the next room reminded her of what was at stake. This wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about survival. And as Emily stared at the folder on the table, she knew tomorrow's meeting could either save her life or end it. The cafe Richard chose was far from Manhattan's glittering towers. It sat on the edge of Queens, a quiet place where the hum of traffic was drowned by the hiss of an old espresso machine. Emily arrived early, her nerves on edge, the folder Aaron had given her, tucked inside her bag. Every time the door creaked open, she stiffened, half expecting one of Veronica's men to step through. At last, Richard entered. Dressed in a plain jacket and slacks, he looked nothing like the polished husband she had seen at the gala. His hair was unkempt, his eyes tired. He scanned the room carefully before sitting across from her. "You came," he said softly, as if surprised. "I'm not sure I should have," Emily admitted. "For all I know, you could be leading me straight into a trap." Richard shook his head. If I wanted you gone, Veronica would have handled it already. I'm here because I want to stop her, and because you deserve to know the truth. He slid a slim envelope across the table. Emily hesitated before opening it. Inside were photographs. Veronica with politicians, with businessmen, with people whose names she recognized from headlines. Some images showed documents being signed. Others captured money changing hands. Then came the bank records, numbers stretching into the millions, traced through accounts in the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't rumor. This was undeniable evidence. Richard leaned forward, lowering his voice. For years, Veronica has manipulated everyone. Me, the press, our so-called allies. She blackmails those who oppose her, and pays off those who can be bought. She tells the world she was born into wealth. But the truth is, she clawed her way up by laundering money through my family's company. And I let her. I didn't stop her when I should have. Emily studied his face, searching for lies. But all she saw was exhaustion, regret carved into every line. Why tell me now? She asked. Because you've already cracked her facade, Richard replied. She's terrified of you. You embarrassed her in front of everyone she thought she controlled. And if the evidence comes from you, she can't spin it as betrayal. The world has already seen you as the one voice that stood up against her. Emily sat back, overwhelmed. Between Aaron's folder and Richard's evidence, she held enough to destroy Veronica completely. Yet fear pressed down on her. If I go public, she'll come after me harder than ever. My mother, too. She threatened her. Richard's expression hardened. Then we protect her. I can arrange security, safe housing if needed, but you must act quickly. Veronica is planning a counter-strike, a lawsuit, false charges, anything to discredit you. Once she moves, it will be harder to fight back. The weight of it all made Emily's chest ache. She hadn't asked for this war, but now she was standing in the center of it. She looked down at the photographs, the evidence that could bring down one of the most feared women in New York. Richard reached across the table, his voice steady. Emily, this is your chance to do more than survive. You can end her reign of fear, not just for you, but for everyone she's crushed along the way. Emily met his gaze, her own voice trembling but firm. Then I'll do it. I'll expose her. But as she spoke, the cafe door swung open. Two men in black suits stepped inside, scanning the room with sharp eyes. Emily's stomach dropped. Richard stiffened. Because sitting in that quiet cafe, they both realized the same thing. Veronica already knew about their meeting. The cafe, once filled with the quiet hiss of steaming milk and the soft hum of conversation, suddenly felt like a trap. The two men in black suits scanned the room with precision, their eyes cold, calculating. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Richard's jaw tightened as he leaned closer. Stay calm, he whispered. Don't look at them. We'll leave through the back. Emily's heart pounded as she gathered the envelope and slipped it into her bag. Every muscle in her body screamed to run, but she forced herself to rise casually, following Richard toward the restroom at the back of the cafe. The men tracked their movement, their steps deliberate. Richard pushed open a side door that led into a narrow alley. The sudden rush of cold air slapped Emily's face, jolting her into motion. They hurried down the alley, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. They're following us, Emily gasped. Richard nodded grimly. Keep moving. The alley opened into the chaos of a crowded street. Taxi horns blared, vendors shouted, and people rushed past carrying shopping bags. Richard grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her into the swarm of bodies. For a moment, the noise and confusion shielded them. But then she saw them again. One of the men cutting through the crowd with unnerving speed, his gaze locked on her, like a hawk on its prey. Over here, Richard said, pulling her toward the subway entrance. They dashed down the steps, the smell of iron and grease filling their lungs. A train screeched to a stop just as they reached the platform. They shoved inside, the doors closing a breath before their pursuers could reach them. Emily collapsed onto a seat, her chest heaving. Richard remained standing, gripping the overhead rail, his eyes never leaving the window. The men were there on the platform, staring at them as the train pulled away, their expressions promising this wasn't over. "They know we have the evidence," Emily whispered. "They've known for longer than I thought," Richard admitted. "She's tightening the noose. We can't stay in the city much longer." The train rattled through the tunnels, its flickering lights casting uneasy shadows. Emily clutched her bag, feeling the sharp edges of the folder inside. It was more than paper now. It was a target painted on her back. When they emerged from the subway, the night had fallen. Richard led her through side streets, avoiding main roads, his every step calculated, yet the sense of being hunted never left. At one corner, Emily swore she saw the same black car that had once parked outside her apartment. Finally, they ducked into an abandoned warehouse near the docks. The smell of salt water and rust clung to the air. Richard bolted the door behind them. "We'll be safe here for the night," he said, though his eyes betrayed doubt. Emily sank against the wall, her hands shaking. "How much longer can we keep running?" "As long as it takes," Richard replied firmly, "until we expose her." But before she could respond, the sound of tires screeching outside made them both freeze. Headlights cut through the cracked windows, flooding the dark warehouse with white light. Emily's blood turned to ice. Veronica's men had found them, and this time there was no crowd to disappear into. The warehouse groaned under the weight of silence. Dust floated in the beams of headlights, streaming through broken windows. Emily pressed her back against the cold wall, her pulse hammering in her ears. Richard stood near the bolted door, every muscle tense, listening. Then came the sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. The crunch of gravel outside, followed by the metallic creak of the door being forced open. Richard's eyes darted to Emily. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The lock gave way with a sharp crack. The door swung inward, and 3 men in dark suits stepped inside, their expressions grim, their movements calculated. Behind them, a 4th figure emerged, Veronica herself. Emily's breath caught. Even here, without the glittering gowns or diamond earrings, Veronica radiated power. Her tailored black coat gleamed under the harsh light, her smile razor-sharp. "Well, well," Veronica purred, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "The little waitress and my traitor husband. Quite the pair." Richard stepped forward, shielding Emily. "It's over, Veronica. We have everything we need to expose you." Her laugh was cold, brittle. "Expose me? To whom? The press I own? The politicians who owe me favors? Please, Richard, you should know by now. Truth bends to those who hold the power." Emily forced herself to step out from behind him. Her knees trembled, but she stood tall. "Not this time. People saw what you did to me at the gala. They know what you are." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "They saw a child mouthing off. That's all. And soon they'll see you for what I tell them you are. A liar, a thief, a sortie. A girl who tried to ruin me because she wanted attention." One of the men pulled a photograph from his pocket and tossed it at Emily's feet. It showed her carrying the folder out of the cafe. Proof that they knew. Proof that she was already marked. Richard clenched his fists. "If you touch her," Veronica cut him off with a wave of her hand. "You'll do what? You've been weak your entire life, Richard. That's why you hid behind me. That's why you let me build what you couldn't. And now you want to play the hero." Emily bent down, picking up the photo. She looked at Veronica, her voice trembling but clear. "Heroes aren't made by money. They're made by choices. And tonight, I choose to fight you." Veronica's smile faltered for the briefest second, then hardened. She gestured to her men. "Take the folder. Make sure neither of them leaves here with it." The men advanced. Emily's heart pounded as Richard grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor, swinging it with surprising strength. The clash erupted. Shouts, fists, the screech of metal against concrete. Emily darted toward the bag where the folder was hidden, her fingers brushing the strap just as one of the men lunged for her. She scrambled back, clutching it to her chest. Veronica's voice sliced through the chaos. "You can't win, girl. That evidence means nothing if you're dead." Emily's breath hitched. For the first time, she saw something raw in Veronica's eyes. Not just anger, but fear. Real fear. Richard shouted, "Run, Emily! Get out!" But before she could move, another set of headlights flared outside the warehouse. Tires screeched. Doors slammed. New voices barked commands. And in that instant, Emily realized someone else had entered the fight. Someone neither she nor Veronica had expected. The warehouse, moments earlier filled only with Veronica's cold laughter and the clash of fists, erupted into chaos as new voices thundered from outside. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Flashlights sliced through the darkness. Red and blue lights bled through the cracks of the warehouse door. Veronica's men froze, caught off guard. Richard lowered the rusted pipe in his hands, relief washing across his face. Emily clutched the folder to her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The door burst open, and half a dozen officers stormed inside, weapons raised, their shouts echoing off the metal walls. Behind them stepped Robert Ashford, his silver hair gleaming in the harsh light. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo now, only a dark coat, but his presence was no less commanding. "Emily," Robert called, his voice steady but urgent. "Come here." Emily blinked in shock. How did you—" "I've been watching Veronica for years," Robert said, stepping forward as two officers restrained one of Veronica's men. "When you stood up to her at the gala, I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried to silence you. I wasn't going to let that happen." Veronica's face twisted in fury. "You meddling old fool," she spat. "You think bringing the police here will stop me? I own half this city." Robert didn't flinch. "Not anymore. Between Aaron's evidence, Richard's testimony, and Emily's courage, your empire is crumbling." Veronica's eyes darted wildly, the mask of calm slipping. "This isn't over. None of you know what you're dealing with." Two officers moved to cuff her, but she jerked back, her voice rising, almost desperate. "Do you think the truth matters? I've survived worse than this. Money buys silence. Power bends reality. You can't touch me." Emily stepped forward, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "You're wrong. Respect isn't bought, remember? That's why you're losing. Because no one believes in you anymore." The words struck like a blade. Veronica's eyes widened, her composure cracking under the weight of the same truth that had humiliated her at the gala. For the first time, Emily saw the woman not as a queen, but as something smaller. Fragile, desperate, terrified of losing control. The officers pulled Veronica's hands behind her back, the click of the cuffs echoing like a verdict. She thrashed, her voice shrill. "You'll regret this, all of you!" But no one listened. Emily turned to Robert, still clutching the folder. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Robert gave a tired smile. "Because I've seen what happens when good people stay silent. You reminded me that even one voice can change everything. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Courage." Richard stepped beside her, his face lined with guilt. "And I'll testify. I should have done it years ago. You don't have to fight her alone anymore." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt the crushing weight on her chest begin to lift. She wasn't just surviving. She was fighting back, and she wasn't fighting alone. But as Veronica was dragged out of the warehouse, her eyes locked on Emily's, burning with a final venomous promise, and Emily knew that even in handcuffs, Veronica was dangerous, and the real battle was only beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of headlines, courtrooms, and whispers across the city. Veronica Hale, once the untouchable queen of Manhattan's elite, now stood trial under the glare of flashing cameras. Every secret Aaron and Richard had provided was laid bare. The fraudulent accounts, the bribes, the blackmail. The world that had once feared her now watched her unravel with morbid fascination. Emily, who had once been invisible in the background, found herself thrust into the spotlight. Reporters camped outside her building, begging for statements. Talk shows praised her courage, painting her as a symbol of dignity against corruption. Strangers sent letters of encouragement, and even her struggling neighborhood rallied around her, proud that one of their own had stood up against the powerful. Yet through it all, Emily stayed grounded. She still rode the subway, still cooked simple meals for her mother, still held her mother's hand at night when the illness wore her down. Fame was fleeting, she knew. What mattered was survival. And finally, there was hope. When the verdict came, the courtroom was packed. Veronica Hale, her once flawless appearance worn down by weeks of exposure, stood trembling as the judge's gavel struck. Guilty, on all counts. The gasp that rippled through the crowd was almost cathartic. Years of fear, manipulation, and cruelty crumbled in a single word. Veronica's empire was gone, her power stripped, her name forever tarnished. Emily sat quietly at the back of the courtroom, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't cheer or gloat. Instead, she exhaled a long, steady breath she felt she had been holding for months. Outside, reporters swarmed, but Robert and Richard shielded her, guiding her through the chaos. Robert's steady hand on her shoulder reminded her she was no longer alone. Richard, too, kept his word, his testimony sealing the fate of the woman who had once controlled his every move. That night, Emily returned home to her mother, who wept as Emily told her the news. "You did it, sweetheart," her mother whispered, voice frail but full of pride. "You fought for us, for yourself." Emily hugged her tightly. "No, Mum. We fought together. Every sacrifice, every long night, it led here." The weeks turned into months, and slowly, life changed. Emily was offered a scholarship fund established in her name by Robert Ashford, giving her the chance to finally pursue the education she had always dreamed of. A community organization also stepped in, ensuring her mother received proper medical care. For the first time in years, Emily didn't just survive. She lived. She often thought back to the gala, to the moment she had stood trembling yet defiant under Veronica's icy gaze. One sentence, spoken with courage, had changed everything. Not just for her, but for everyone who had once bowed under Veronica's shadow. On a warm spring evening, Emily walked through the city streets, her head held high. The skyscrapers no longer felt like cages of glass and steel, but like towers of possibility. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer afraid. And though Veronica's name would linger in scandal for years, Emily's story lived brighter. A reminder that even the smallest voice could topple the mightiest lies. Because in the end, Emily Carter didn't just reclaim her dignity. She built a new life where no one could take it from her again. So, my wonderful friends, the story has finally come to an end. And yet, if you're still here with me right now, it means something about Emily's journey touched your heart in a very real way. Maybe it reminded you of your own battles, those moments when you had to stand tall even when your knees were shaking. The lesson here is simple but powerful. Dignity is priceless. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "You may fetter my leg, but not even Zeus himself has power over my will." Emily's story proves that. She lost her job, faced fear, and was nearly destroyed by lies, but she never surrendered her dignity, and in the end, that gave her the strength to rebuild her life. Maybe you're facing your own Veronica right now. Maybe it's a boss, a situation, or even a voice inside your head telling you that you're not enough. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear. It's choosing what's right despite it. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you won't miss the next journey. We're in this together.